like to welcome all of you to our November City Club Forum. It's a cold day out there, and thanks for suffering through the cold weather to get here. Have a great turnout today. We're proud to see all of you. First of all, we'd like to thank our sponsors, and if all of you, on your tables, there's a list of the sponsors, and you'll see them on the name plaques up there, and earlier you saw them on the screen. And take a moment to look at those folks and businesses who've supported this organization. It's only through their contributions are we able to keep our lunch prices low and provide services and provide speakers to come in. And if you get to the opportunity when you see some of these businesses, just say thank you for that sponsorship. It'll mean a lot to them. Second, we want to thank many members of the City Club who are support and pay their annual dues. We'd like to encourage all of you here, if you're not a member, to go to our website and consider joining up. One, it puts you on our email system, and we can keep you updated on what programs are going to be offered. You also get a little discount in your lunch price, so there's an advantage there too. We also want to thank Missoula Community Access Television. If you miss any of the programs, or if there's something that's said that you want to go back and hear replayed, you can go to the MCAT website, and they have all of our programs that you can replay. And again, we want to thank MCAT. You've been here every time, and we appreciate the time and effort that you spend to be here. Those people who've not been to City Club Forum before, it's a very simple format. We will introduce our speaker. After they're done, we break into what's called table talk. And the first thing we'd like to do at table talk is, especially if you don't know the people at your table, take a minute or two and introduce yourself to everyone. Part of the effort of City Club is to create a community of people who know each other and get to know each other as individuals and not just simply through issues in politics. So introduce yourself, get to know each other, and then talk about today's program and formulate a question, and then appoint someone at that table to stand up and ask that question. We should be done right at 1 o'clock. If someone has to leave a little bit early, feel free to jump up and leave. And with that, I'd like to introduce Susan Hay-Patrick, who's going to introduce our program today.
Thanks, Jim, and hello, everybody. Many of you might have been here 18 months ago during our first Soft Landing Missoula City Club Forum. At that time, we had the whole ballroom. It was packed. It was one of our most well-attended forums ever. There was a fair degree of tension in the room. A lot of that seems to have died down. But it's one of the things that City Club likes to do is encourage civil discussion of difficult or provocative topics, and I think refugee resettlement has been that, although things seem to be, as you'll hear, going smoothly. You may also remember that Wilmot Collins was with us that day, and as many of you know, he was just elected the mayor of Helena. So. So since we last met, since last Soft Landing Missoula was presenting at City Club, with tremendous community support and the reopening of a resettlement office in Missoula, more than 30 refugee families from 4 countries have found a safe and welcoming home in Missoula. Our 2 presenters will give an overview of the last year, covering successes, challenges, partnerships, and as well as a brief look at what 2018 might bring. So first we have Mary Poole, a 4th-generation Montanan who lives in Missoula with her family. She's been a nurse, an arborist, and a small business owner. In September of 2015, upon seeing that heart-wrenching photo of Alan Kurdi, the 3-year-old who had drowned fleeing the war in Syria, she was moved to try to do more to help refugees fleeing terror and war worldwide. With friends and acquaintances, she formed the group Soft Landing Missoula, now a nonprofit, where Mary serves as executive director, and successfully brought refugee resettlement back to Missoula by garnering community support to ask and assist the International Rescue Committee to reopen an office here. Soft Landing is dedicated to building bridges, not furthering divisions. just like City Club, and welcomes discussion, questions, and conversation as a way to create an inclusive community for all. Mary was also featured recently, this is not in her bio, but I know this is true, in the Starbucks series Upstanders. It's a collection of 11 short films about ordinary people doing extraordinary things to create positive change in their communities. And it premiered recently at the Wilma to a sold-out packed house. It was really wonderful to see. Our other presenter is Jen Barile, who's the Resettlement Director for the International Rescue Committee in Missoula. Jen has lived in and loved Missoula for 18 years. She joined IRC in August of 2016 when the Missoula office opened its doors once again as a refugee resettlement agency. Jen began her work with IRC as a caseworker, and in April of this year was promoted to Resettlement Director. She has a master's in social work from the University of Montana with a focus on social justice. She's worked with various populations, including youth in foster care, survivors of domestic violence, and individuals experiencing homelessness. She's also worked in the travel industry and has a passion for traveling the globe. So please join me in welcoming Mary Poole and Jen Barile.
Thank you, Susan, for such a great intro. And a huge thanks to City Club. It's such an honor to be invited, and it's really great to be able to update our community in this way. So thank you. Like Susan said, we're here from two organizations today, and there may be people in the room that know some of the information we'll go over really briefly in the beginning. But we just wanted to make sure before we delve into how things are going and what this year has looked like for us that we just define a couple terms so we know what group of folks we're talking about and we're all on the same page. So who is a refugee? We'll do this really quick. This person or family must cross an international border. Refugees are people that are forcibly displaced by war or terror or persecution, and they're forced to leave their homes. And they have to cross an international border and actually register with the United Nations. They cannot return to their country of origin, and they have to qualify based on 5 conditions. The United Nations intakes and interviews each family, and they must qualify as a refugee based on persecution because of race, religion, nationality, membership of a particular social group, or political opinion. So it's a pretty distinct group of folks that are displaced from their homes and register with the United Nations. And then once the United Nations identifies that this person is in fact fleeing due to one of those 5 categories, then they begin to see what is the best path for this family. The number one thing that they always try to do is called repatriation, which is just a fancy word to say, can we get you home? Can we help house you, clothe you, feed you for a determined amount of time until the conflict dies down, or there is some sort of path for you to return to your country. And this is always the number one priority. If that looks like it's not going to happen, they can work with the country that's hosting the refugee camp or the refugees. Sometimes they're not hosted in camps. And they can work with that country to say, is there a way for us to locally integrate you here in this second country? So that's the second choice. It's really a challenge because a lot of the countries that people flee to are actually developing nations themselves and don't always have the capacity to take in large numbers of refugees. So the third and final, these are all called durable solutions. The third and final one, and really the last one that's looked at, is if we can't get you home because you face further fear of persecution or death if you were to return home, and we can't locally integrate you into the country that's hosting you currently, is there an option for third country resettlement? So that's what we talk about when we're talking about resettlement. In fact, less than 1% of refugees worldwide, and there's over 20 million refugees worldwide currently. Less than 1% of them will qualify for third country resettlement, and they qualify based on additional priority categories. So, children with chronic medical conditions, women at risk, political refugees, victims of torture. There's additional qualities that kind of put someone on the top of the list for resettlement. So really, when Soft Landing was forming, as Susan talked about, we had to learn all of these things and figure out what is the path, how does someone get here? And one of the most important things that we learned is after the UN goes through this whole process and identifies that 1% of folks that would even qualify to apply to be in the United States and then go through our vetting process and then, one of the most important pieces for a town is that you have to have the presence of a resettlement agency. There are only 9 agencies in the whole United States that resettle refugees. They operate in over 300 locations, but all of that work is done by one of 9 agencies that have a contract with the State Department to do that work. So the International Rescue Committee is one of those 9 agencies. They've been in Missoula before. They were here when the Hmong came in 1979 in the early 80s and did that resettlement work here in Missoula. So when we started reaching out to resettlement agencies, they were really interested and supportive of that call. And lo and behold, months and months later, long story short, lots of community support, the International Rescue Committee got approved to open up an office here in Missoula. So, without further ado, I'm going to let Jen take the mic for a minute and kind of explain what the International Rescue Committee does and what that year has looked like for her.
Thank you, and thanks for having me today as well. I really appreciate this opportunity. So some of you may know about the International Rescue Committee, or the IRC, as I'll call it. So the IRC is a nonprofit organization, just like Soft Landing Missoula is. But we do have a contract and agreement with the State Department where we are required to provide services for refugees that are resettling here in Missoula. And I'll go into that a little bit more in depth in a minute. The picture of Albert Einstein is up there because some of you may or may not know that the IRC was actually founded at his request during Nazi Germany. When many individuals were fleeing during that time. Yeah, next slide, thanks. So 1 year later, I guess I wanted to kind of just briefly talk about what the IRC office looked like when we opened a little over a year ago, about 15 months ago, and then kind of what's been happening for our office. So with that contract with the State Department, we're required to provide services like housing. Well, actually, I'll get to that in a minute. So we started with like 2.5 staff when we opened, and I was the caseworker then, and now our office has grown to about five staff. So we have an employment specialist who connects refugees to employment. And job readiness training. We connect the refugee families to childcare. We have a housing caseworker that secures housing for families when we get a notice that a family is arriving, which is usually on average, we get 2 weeks notice that a family is coming. Sometimes it's 1 week. And so we're looking for apartments for those families. We're picking them up from the airport and so on. So really this past year or 15 months or so, as Susan had mentioned, we've been resettling refugee families from mainly 4 countries, the Democratic Republic of Congo, Eritrea, which is next to Ethiopia in Africa, and then some families from Syria and some from Iraq as well. We have resettled a few Ethiopian families, and, we don't know necessarily who we're going to get. Again, we kind of get short notice on which families are arriving, but as many of you know, our first families, when the IRC opened their doors, were Congolese families, and we have a lot of families from Africa right now. So when the State Department kind of sets the contract with the IRC, and after they had also, a lot of input from the community, different providers like the school district and healthcare providers, taking all that information, the State Department sets the number of refugees that they think would be able to be successful being resettled in Missoula. So last year in 2017, that number was set at 125 refugees. We did not hit that number, but we came close, around 94 refugees were resettled in Missoula. And when I say last year, our fiscal year runs from October 1st through the end of September. So we're at the beginning of what we call the 2018 fiscal year now. And the State Department, this may change, but as of today, they still are suggesting that Missoula can resettle up to 120 individual refugees for the coming fiscal year. So I started to kind of talk about our programs. I got ahead of myself. So I guess I wanted to kind of give you an idea of what the IRC office does. So we provide case management. We have a caseworker who's doing, enrolling adults in English language classes, enrolling children in school, making referrals for mental health care, health screenings. We do family reunification if refugees want to apply for family members to come. We provide cultural orientation for all of the families. So all of the refugees that come to Missoula get cultural orientation on, what it's like to live in the U.S., what it's like to work here, go to school here, and things like that. We have a finance manager, Helen, who's in the audience today, who does some financial literacy training with our families, along with Missoula Federal Credit Union, who's here today. We're partnering with them as well. So there's a lot really to do, of course, to get families settled here in Missoula. Yeah, and I think Mary wanted to talk. So that's kind of the general gist of services that we provide, and those services are part of our contract with the State Department. But Mary's going to talk a little bit more in depth about some of the partnerships that have developed with the IRC and Soft Landing out in the community. Oh, yeah. Thanks. Did I not have that on there? Okay. Mary was just reminding me, I'm not sure where it is in my presentation, but this is just helpful information, I think, for folks to have. So the IRC, we are also required to have quarterly consultations with community partners. So that means that every few months we sit in a room at the IRC with, healthcare providers, the health department, school districts, really everyone that's involved in supporting the refugees, mostly agencies, faith communities and such. We sit around and talk about how things are going, what challenges are coming up. Can Missoula resettle 120 refugees this year? So we do have those conversations. We get input from the community on, what resettlement is looking like, what are people's concerns, and we try to address those there. Thanks.
I moved that slide. I'm so sorry. I'm just realizing that. That's why it didn't come up. That's my fault. I hijacked her. Totally moved that slide. Okay, so Jen talked a little bit about what the IRC office does here, and it's very, very important and crucial work in our community to bring refugees. One of the things that was happening when Soft Landing started, as we were doing a lot of research going into this, is this something that we can do in our community, a lot of conversations within our community, but also we started reaching out to other cities that do this work. And one thing that became very apparent was that there's a lot of partnerships that happen in cities that resettle refugees. And in a new city such as Missoula, it would really be beneficial for us to incorporate into a 501c3 and continue to do the work of supporting refugees as they come here. So we kind of came together and we got a board and did all of that, and we saw that our real vision here in Missoula is to help Missoula to be a welcoming, supportive, and informed community that can assist refugees to integrate and thrive. So beyond working with refugee families, what can we do for Missoula to make sure that this is a successful and welcoming community for resettlement? So for us, that means we're a really small organization. We have, we started out completely volunteer. We all volunteered, many, many hours of our week for over a year. And now we have 3 staff that adds up to about 2 full-time staff. And with that, we are very scrappy, and we do all that we can. But we have a really robust education and outreach program. We talk all over the city and all over the state, actually, about refugees, and really with the goal of creating this welcoming community, with getting people's questions and concerns addressed and putting forth some basic information about refugee resettlement. We provide language support services, and I'll talk a little bit more about this later, but one of the greatest things about being a small nonprofit is really being able to kind of sneak in when there is a need. So we found that there was an additional need for some language support services, so we sneak into that hole. We had a transportation program which started, when families were first getting here in August. We were getting everybody hooked up with bikes, working with free cycles. Well, you can probably guess how long that lasted, till about the first snowfall. And then everybody wanted to drive. So we've now been working with people to help them study for the driver's exam. And with the IRC, processed donated cars, which has been incredible. We processed close to 10 donated cars for folks. And we have a winter driving 101 coming up next week. The other thing that we do is work with a ton of volunteers and community engagement. We kind of like to make people's dreams come true, and a lot of what Missoulians' dreams are is to help with this project. So we work really hard to kind of fit people and match people and hand people over and fit people's requests and what they want to give, and get that to refugee families. And we've most recently this year focused on a lot of community events that are kind of designed to bring the Missoula community and refugees together in one space so we can all get to know each other. We had a huge successful soccer tournament that we're going to be doing every year, and I can't even tell you how fabulous it was. We mixed the teams up, and it was a Refugee Day World Cup, and it was really wonderful, dancing and music at the end. And we more recently put on, with partners, about 9 events for Welcoming Week. And 3 of these events specifically were cultural events designed for refugee families to be able to kind of showcase their culture and tradition for us so that we may learn from them. So we're really kind of operating in that area. We hope to bring a lot more food opportunities to Missoula soon, and we're working hard on that. And then we process in-kind donations. Like I was saying, Missoula wants to give so much. So we process in-kind donations and help with home setups for the family, and then just additional giving. So, okay, here's that slide that I totally switched on you. I'm so sorry.
Okay. Let's go with the flow. This kind of goes back to what I was saying about those quarterly consultations that we have with community partners. This is a pretty full list, but not extensive. Obviously, the IRC can't do this work without Soft Landing Missoula and vice versa, and neither of our organizations can do this work without the Missoula community. So we work with many partners. IRC has trained over 150 family mentor volunteers to work with families that are coming to Missoula. So each refugee or refugee family that comes to Missoula actually gets trained by IRC staff, and we support those mentors, and they work with the families to, teach them how to ride the bus and how to shop at the grocery store here and all those wonderful things. So the volunteers, the community partners, it's all necessary to make this happen. And then I guess I wanted to highlight a couple things that Mary will touch upon too, but the families have been thriving here this past year. kids are enrolling in schools, and families are working. So I think the next slide, maybe Mary's going to go more in depth into that, into some of those partnerships.
Yeah, I guess we just wanted to show you guys an example of what we're talking about when we talk about partnerships. These can be really easy, simple, quick partnerships. They can be really complicated and complex. And this is one of the most organic ones that kind of sprung up. And little things like this are happening with all of our partners every day. So, for example, like I was talking about English language services, Missoula has excellent, high-quality English language services, but it's small. We don't have a large immigrant population. And so here we are bringing more immigrants, and how can we help support that? So, the opportunity one, I almost labeled it problem, and I was like, there are no problems. There are only opportunities. So this is opportunity number one. Missoula has this high quality but very limited ELL services here. I keep saying ESL, but it's actually now ELL, English Language Learning. And so enter, solution, volunteers, hundreds, you guys, hundreds of volunteers lining up to help families. A lot of people were really interested in stepping in for English training. With the adult English training, or English learning, the Lifelong Learning Center, another acronym, LLC, they have the only free adult ELL program in Missoula. And it's a small program, but very high quality. So we were able to help out. They actually don't have a facility right now where they can support families that don't have their kids in school yet or enrolled in daycare. So we were able to give on-site at Soft Landing Missoula's office English tutoring before people can step into there. And then we've also provided them with volunteers. And then the IRC for the adults, like Jen said, everyone has this mentor team, and the IRC was giving out ways that you could encourage English use, ways that you could, as a volunteer, help out with English language acquisition. And for the kids, so Missoula County Public Schools has done just an incredible, incredible job at integrating these children into, regular classrooms. Again, very small ELL program. So what we were then able to do with their help is provide over 30 tutors that are now in the public school system. And one wonderful thing about that is the fact that every single ELL student, not just refugee students, now has access to one-on-one tutoring multiple times a week. And that wasn't the case. And so I think one of the wonderful and beautiful things about resettlement, and I know that the IRC is so dedicated to in the communities that they're in, is being a part of the larger conversation of what are the needs in our community and how can we use this momentum and how can we use what we're able to offer refugees to also benefit others in the community in need. And this is just such a great example of students getting more because refugees are here. So, opportunity number two, we have all of these volunteers that want to help, but some of them aren't necessarily trained in English tutoring. They don't feel very comfortable with their skills in this area. So the Lifelong Learning Center then has been working with us. They got a small grant. They were able to say, how could we provide a good tutor training for adult tutors and child tutors. So they worked with the IRC, with Soft Landing Missoula, with Missoula County Public Schools, and we came up with a training. And then now their first session was completely sold out in a day. So they opened up a second session, again, sold out with waiting lists. So people are getting into these classes, they're getting trained, so then they can come back into opportunity one with more skills. So it's just, it's a tiny, tiny example of all of the partnerships that are just, really it's just harnessing this huge excitement that the community has to be a part of this. So just wanted to share that with you. We're fancily calling it a case study, just to sound cool.
Thanks, Mary. And, as Mary was talking, I guess I wanted to point out, hopefully this comes across when we're talking to you all this afternoon, but the amount of work that goes into supporting the refugees is a lot. Luckily, we live in such an amazing community that everyone's on board and excited. But, you know, there's a lot of behind-the-scenes work that our providers are doing, like maybe they've never had interpretation services before, and now they need to figure that out. You know, what's required for that, making sure that people understand how to get to the bus stop in the morning with their children. And, you know, there's a lot that, that all of the community providers have had to learn, and we're learning together. And so this past year has been a really great experience in that, you know, figuring out what's going to work best to serve the families. How can we do it? How can we do it well? How can we do it efficiently? But it's definitely been work for everyone. So thank you. Sorry, I have something in my eye. So looking ahead, as many of you know, the past year has kind of been up and down as far as refugee resettlement goes. There have been a few executive orders and a lot of back and forth. So right now, the refugee admissions program in the U.S. has resumed, except there are a few populations that they're asking for another 90-day wait to I think the idea behind it is to just make sure that things are secure. So we may see, I mean, we've seen a slowdown in refugees coming to Missoula, that's for sure. We're still continuing to get families, and we will. There's a lot that happens overseas in the resettlement process that has been delayed. For example, if you have a medical exam and then there's a 6-month delay, you have to kind of start that process over. But we will continue to receive families, families from Syria and Iraq in particular. For Missoula, will probably be delayed in coming versus the other families. I mentioned family reunification earlier as a service the IRC provides, where if you have a spouse or child, we can help you complete some paperwork to try to bring them here to be with you. That program has been suspended. So we don't know what that will look like, unfortunately. So we do have families here with children or spouses still waiting to come to the U.S., and that program's on hold, unfortunately. But so we'll still try to serve the same mainly for populations that I mentioned before of refugees. I think it's really important to build this critical mass of individuals from specific backgrounds. So for a few reasons. One, they end up forming communities where they can support each other, and that's really important. The other thing is, I don't know, in the Missoula community, if we could take on more language groups. That means, you know, more interpreters, and it's a lot. So right now, the IRC, I mentioned we have 5 full-time staff now, caseworkers, employment specialists, and myself. But we also have 5 on-call interpreters as well. So those languages, there's 3 main languages. So, you know, expanding that, we could do it as a Missoula community, but that's going to take more dialogue with our community partners. And so, yeah, those are, our hope is that things won't be so slow and that we'll continue to get families and be able to help people fleeing. But, you know, you never know. Things are pretty up in the air right now. So, yeah. And do you have any closing? Okay. Well, that was our presentation. We just kind of wanted to give you a general overview. And I want to thank you for your time. Thank you for listening. And thank you for coming out.
Thank you very much. It was a wonderful presentation. Now, if all of you, again, introduce yourselves at the table, make certain you do that, and then take another 5-10 minutes and discuss the program and appoint someone at your table to ask a question. All right, Larry, if you'd like to, Larry Brame is our designated mic man. So if you'd like to ask a question, just raise your hand and he'll come.
Do anything? I'm Joan Perry, and this is my first luncheon. The question that our table came up with was, can you talk a little bit about the value that these refugees bring to our community and how we could market that to the naysayers. Or how we could not promote, what's the word I'm looking for? How we could educate people who are not really in favor of this kind of program and show them the value that these people add to our community. Something like that. Thank you.
I mean,
Thank you.
I feel like Mary and I could both probably answer this question, so maybe I'll talk about more like statistics or facts. Well, obviously, the diversity that the families bring to Missoula is an incredible benefit. I don't know how many times both of us, have heard from community members coming up to us saying, "This is so amazing. My children get to go to school with people from different cultures and backgrounds," and so just the diversity and the learning that comes with that, I think, is a huge benefit. If you can find more information on the IRC website, but I'll just give you a general overview. For example, there have been a lot of recent studies that have come out talking about the economic impact that refugees have, and that there are some thoughts from the naysayers, as you said, about refugees being a drain on communities. But there's a lot of research out there that says the opposite. So refugees are filling gaps in employment, and we actually see that in Missoula. So we work with an employer that has hired maybe 12 or 13 or so of the refugees. Not because they just, want to feel good about hiring refugees, because they have a need that they can't fill. So, so I guess the economic benefit, of course, the cultural benefit. I'm trying to think if you want to add.
Well, I think in the economic piece too, and what's really exciting is that refugees start small businesses at double the rate of American-born citizens. So, as we all know, living in Montana, you have to be scrappy and you have to be creative. The old joke of like, we all work 3 jobs, right? And definitely count myself among that. So I think that a lot of ingenuity is brought when you're bringing refugees and immigrants, and a lot of perseverance. I mean, these folks have been through stuff we can't even imagine, and they're survivors, and they get here and they want to work and they want to put their roots down. And we have so many people that are interested in eventually opening up their own business and becoming employers. And you see that nationwide. There's so much work going on in the Rust Belt right now, and refugees and immigrants are just reinvigorating this kind of dead zone in our country, and it's really exciting. Sometimes they even fill the role of mayor. What? So awesome. But enough about that. And I think so I think you just get that turnover, that invigoration. And in terms of using that talking point when you're talking with people that have concerns, and I think we're in a really exciting place right now because we're just starting to see that. This program's been going for a little over a year. People are starting to get their feet under them. They're starting to really find a home here, and starting to reach out through some of these events, through different ways. And I think we just have to have patience. We just have to, when people start to live and work right alongside of our community members with questions, that's where that work is done. It's done less with just throwing facts and statistics at people, and more with, we have neighbors now that are like, I did not agree with refugees. I love these people. And we have people that are working in these places where, we don't design workplaces to where everybody agrees on everything, so they're integrating into workplaces, and that's where we'll see a lot of that work happen, right there.
Our table would like you to follow up on the issue of kind of career paths and jobs. And I understand about the entrepreneurship, but it's a big gap to go from the Walmarts and Holiday Inn and folding laundry and daily where they're working to running your own business. And that's skills and training and understanding American finance. And does Soft Landings or IRC have at least some idea of how you're going to help them do that?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Jana. That's a really good question. So just this year, as a new IRC office here in Missoula, we've kind of, with feedback, we've gathered feedback from the refugee clients, from our partners, staff, on kind of our top priorities moving forward as an office. So we started small and we hope to grow our programming, and we've done our strategic planning for the year, and there are 3 main areas of focus for the refugees, and one is economic empowerment. And so, there are other IRC offices around the U.S. that already have programs, career development programs in place. They're evidence-based and researched and successful. So our goal in the next coming year would be to develop that, because right now our employment specialist, finds initial employment. She does some job readiness training. We have a program where, that's more about how do you interview and do a resume, right? But the next steps of that will be computer literacy, digital literacy. Of course, English language is a component of that, right? But we do hope to develop our employment program so that we will, there'll be courses for folks on, when their English language skills are better. Some people come in with really good English language skills. So we'll be developing that hopefully this year in order to give people more employment opportunities. Our employment specialist is also connecting with the University of Montana to talk about what does that look like for a refugee that may or may not have a degree. Does it transfer? Can they go back to school? What would that look like? So those are all pieces that we're focusing on specifically this year.
And I'll just add, ours has been like this huge choose-your-own-adventure novel from the beginning, and we're kind of almost more reactive. The IRC does a fabulous job, not only here, but around the nation, of developing these programs and the structure for folks, and we're able to just pick up small pieces of that as we see a need. One piece that we're working on right now is we have some folks that are really interested in entrepreneurship through food. And so we are fumbling our way through partnerships with the health department and the business community and the food community to see if we can make some of that happen in the next year. So we are working in partnership with the IRC with that as well. Yeah.
Okay. We have a question at this table.
Hi, I'm Lori Harris with United Way. And during our fire season this year, we had a little problem come to us that was about in-kind donations. So you get someone in Illinois that calls and says, I have a truck full of fill in the blank, and they want to send it to Missoula. And, that's not really a good idea. And what do we do with that? What do we do with that? So the suggestion that we would make is that, that's fabulous, and we thank you for your generosity. But you know what? There's somebody in your own community that could use that. And it worked most of the time. And it's hard to say, the best thing you could do is to send us $10, send us $50, do a collection at your book club, and, that kind of thing. So when you mentioned household goods, in-kind donations, fortunately we're talking local, which is good, but it would be helpful, I think, for all of us to know who are your frontline resources for that. If someone wants to donate, resources, appliances, clothing, furniture, kitchen goods, etc., for refugee families, so that you can set up households for them. Who do we talk to? Where do we go? How do we do that? Is it a just-in-time situation? Is it on your website?
Sure. Yeah.
How do we do that?
I can talk to that, and then I can completely commiserate with your situation, too. People are very generous. But it's great. Actually, one of the best ways is to get on our website, softlandingmissoula.org. We have a kit list on our website, and the easiest way to get the right stuff and quality stuff to families is if you make a kit. And we have a list of a bathroom kit, a kitchen kit, toiletries, and it comes in a clear Tupperware bin. Then we can get with the IRC and say we have all of the kits required for your next home setup. It's very clean. It's very easy. In fact, some folks in Bozeman right now are making us about 50 kits that they're going to deliver around Thanksgiving, which is incredible. And what is so important about the in-kind donations and why it's so essential that and incredible that the community has stepped up with this is each incoming family gets a very, very small amount of money from the federal government for their first 30 to 90 days here, and Jen can talk more about that if people are interested. But from that money, they have to secure housing, but they also have to set up a home. So it doesn't go very far. And so the more that the community can provide for pots and pans and silverware and all of those things that cost money, the more of that can go towards housing and really important things. So getting on our website, we also have kind of immediate needs list in that same area where our kits are listed. Folks will come to us in need of a laptop because they're studying for their engineering exam with one of our tutors, or they'll come to us for something as simple as a toaster, and then we're able to put that on our website, and man, it just comes through the door, which is amazing. But our office is like kind of one of the main dumping grounds. Oh gosh, should I say that even? One of the main receptacles for in-home, in-kind donations. And then the IRC also rents a storage unit that's in a local church parking lot, and they take in larger furniture items. So it is and it isn't very organized, and it isn't very well attended.
I don't have anything to add to that, except I'm going to make a shameless plug so Mary mentioned that, so there's a per capita or per person amount of money that comes with each refugee individual. So they don't get a monthly stipend. Once that money is gone, it's gone, and IRC spends it on their behalf, and it all goes to, rent, deposit. Sometimes they have to pay a double deposit because they don't have credit history. Although we've been working with some amazing property management companies that have been willing to work with us. But basically, that money goes quickly. And one of the requirements through the State Department that makes sense but is a challenge is we are required to provide brand new beds for each individual. So we have to buy those new. And that eats up a huge chunk of the family's funds. And so talk to me later if you have a connection with, because that can be that can take up half of the money that the family has. So that's just one, somehow if someone wants to donate brand new beds, that would be great.
We had a question about challenges coming to Missoula, where we don't have a lot of refugees here. Just wondering if you could speak to that a bit at the community level. I mean, some of the individual level, of course, that's where it really makes the most difference. But what are the challenges that you see at the community level with partners or with people that live here that aren't supportive of the work that you're doing?
I can talk about the partners maybe, Mary, if you want. Yeah. I kind of touched on it a little earlier. It's just, even though Missoula resettled refugees a while back, I still think a lot of this is new to the community again. So figuring out protocols and best practices. So here's an example. We've been working closely with Partnership Health Center. They've been amazing and have done a lot of work. So it takes a lot of staff time. They've had to bring on a new staff member. So building capacity for community partners can be a challenge. And I mentioned setting up, interpretation and making sure that people understand when they walk out of a medical appointment what is happening, what's the follow-up, right? Well, now that we've got that dialed down and we're doing it really well with PHC, we want to be able to support mental health for refugees, right? Because they've been through a lot of trauma. But what does that look like? Does that look, are refugees open to Western methods of mental health support? Are they not? That's where the expertise of the IRC, I think, comes in handy. Like, the IRC has 26 offices around the U.S., and the other offices have been doing this a lot longer than us. There are mental health programs specifically to help refugees. So it's this constant like questioning, how do we do better? How do we serve refugees better? But it's going to look different, and what does that look like? And gathering that research and information. So all of those pieces are a challenge, I think. I think it's a challenge the community embraces. But for example, Missoula Federal Credit Union is doing financial literacy and banking classes for the families. But we need to do 3 separate classes for 3 different language groups, right? So there's a lot of that planning. And then the IRC has shared with the Missoula Fed, there's all this financial literacy information about how best to teach refugees about financial literacy, right? It's going to look different. So all of those pieces, I think, have been challenging. But again, everyone's embraced that, but it takes time.
And then I guess just on the community level, back to your question, it's kind of like what I was talking about before, and as Jen just ended her talk with, it takes time. You know, really starting to see relationships, organic relationships form in the communities. And the faith community has been fabulous at this. There's so many refugees that are attending church services and are finding their own little places here. Of course, they start out with IRC mentors that help guide them through kind of that American cultural piece. And they're finding community. Again, as Jen talked about, bringing more folks from the same groups of people really kind of help create confidence in where you are and start to support each other in that. But it all just kind of, it's going to take time to one, have folks feel comfortable here in our community, and two, have our community be comfortable, wholly comfortable with refugees. Does that answer kind of what you were? Yeah, okay.
Hi, April Summers with Missoula Downtown. Our question is about housing. Affordable housing is a challenge in Missoula, and how are you confronting that challenge?
Great question. So just what Susan mentioned earlier, a little bit of my background. I've worked with folks experiencing homelessness, so I do have some experience in that. I will be honest and say that refugees get so much support in this community that I almost feel like they're getting support that maybe folks experiencing homelessness are not, right? So I actually think that the refugees have maybe, they come to Missoula through the U.S. Resettlement program with a little pot of money. It's small, but at least they have that, right? So we've worked over the past year with different property management companies to get them to explain that even though a refugee may not have 3 years of rental history or credit history, right, that there is the support from the IRC, and that we can guarantee at least those first few months, rent's going to be paid for. So that's an advantage that I think the refugee families have over maybe other populations or other individuals that just don't have any resources. But then, we're really cautious to try to put refugees in housing that they can sustain, right? And that is hard in Missoula. Luckily, we have a ton of volunteers, so if we're short on housing, we have to put someone in an apartment that is maybe a little bit higher priced. If we find something more affordable, we can move families and help move them into a new home. Most of the families, especially the two parent or two adult households, are doing really well and wouldn't qualify for most of the low-income housing programs here in Missoula. Of course, like all Missoulians, the households that struggle are the single parents, usually single moms with kids, and we are working with the Housing Authority and Council Groves and other agencies to get people on waiting lists for low-income housing if they're eligible. But again, the majority of our families who are working don't need that. But yeah, it's still a struggle, but again, I feel like they have a lot of maybe additional support with all of our volunteers and such.
I think we have 2 minutes for one more question. What do you say, Jim?
Hi, Joelle and Shannon with Sussex School. We were just wondering about a personal story, maybe without names attached, but just a positive personal story that would help paint the picture of all the good work that you're doing that would be inspirational for us.
Okay, there's a handful. I know. I think, I don't know. I want to tell you a million. I know. Yeah, it's a good story. Okay, I'm going to maybe go too fast. One, we have a family from Iraq. Both the husband and wife are engineers, right? Engineers, sorry, I'm like blanking out. Yes, yes. And so it took a lot of work to try to figure out like certifications, and now the woman had landed a really fantastic job making a significant wage, right? So that's a big success. But I think Mary was pointing out, if any of you attended the lecture that Soft Landing hosted last week, there is a gentleman from Iraq that actually came to Missoula on a Fulbright scholarship in 2010 to 2012, and then went back to Iraq, ended up getting married, and had to leave Iraq through the, as a refugee through the refugee program. And had friends here that tried really hard to get him to come back and work at the university. He got his master's in linguistics. And they had, he and his wife had their first child here in the U.S. So it's one of the couple first Americans that have been born since this past year, since the refugees have started coming.
And I'll just add really quick on the first story, the gal that is now working as an engineer has to redo some of the tests eventually. And so we kind of put the call out. She asked for a tutor to help her with her English. And she has great English, but just help get through some of those materials so that she can be set for the test. And I mean, within a week, we had not just an English tutor, but someone who was also an immigrant who is studying for the exact same test, and now they're study buddies, and they're working really hard on that. So just really great little things happening every day.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the time you've taken, and thank you for that presentation. Everyone, put on your calendars Monday, December 11th. Our next City Club Forum will be Take Flight Missoula, discussing improving the air transportation in Missoula and planned airport improvements. We'll have guest speaker Beth Berman-Fraze and possibly Airport Director Chris Jensen and Airport Architect Chris Martinson. So put that on your calendar. And again, please, it really helps us if you register online so we know how many people are coming. Spread the words. And also next week, everyone coming, bring a friend. Thank you for coming.